The auditorium was packed that evening. Every seat was filled with parents, teachers, and students who had come to watch the annual spring concert at Lincoln High School. The air buzzed with quiet conversations and the rustling of programs. Phones were silenced. Cameras were ready. Everyone was waiting for the performances to begin, but nobody was prepared for what they were about to witness. The stage lights dimmed slightly as the principal stepped up to the microphone. She welcomed everyone and explained that this year's concert featured 12 talented students from different grades. Each would perform a piece they had been practicing for months. The audience clapped politely as she read through the list of performers. Then she paused. Her voice became softer, almost careful, as she introduced the next performer. A 12-year-old girl from the 7th grade, a girl who had been learning piano for only 8 months, a girl who would be performing a classical piece that even advanced students found challenging, and then she added the detail that made everyone sit up a little straighter in their seats. The girl was blind. A wave of whispers rippled through the crowd. Parents leaned toward each other, eyebrows raised. Students craned their necks to get a better view of the stage. Everyone wondered the same thing. How would a blind girl find her way to the piano? Would someone guide her? Would she need help? The curtains on the side of the stage moved slightly. A figure appeared. She was small for her age, wearing a simple blue dress that her grandmother had helped her pick out that morning. Her dark hair was pulled back neatly. In her right hand she held a white cane, the kind that blind people use to navigate the world around them, and she was completely alone. No teacher walked beside her. No parent held her hand. No classmate guided her steps. She stood at the edge of the stage, facing an audience of hundreds, about to walk into what must have seemed like an endless void of space. The auditorium fell completely silent. You could hear everything in that moment. The hum of the air conditioning, someone coughing softly in the back row, the creak of chairs as people shifted forward, not wanting to miss a single second of what was happening. The girl took her first step. Her cane swept in a gentle arc across the wooden floor, tapping lightly as it searched for obstacles. She moved slowly but deliberately, her head held high. Each step was measured and careful. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't hesitating. She was simply walking forward with a kind of quiet confidence that seemed impossible for someone who couldn't see where she was going. In the third row, a woman sat frozen in her seat. This was the girl's mother, and her hands were gripped together so tightly that her knuckles had turned completely white. She had watched her daughter practice this walk dozens of times at home, in their living room, at the school during after-hours rehearsals. But watching it now in front of hundreds of people was almost unbearable. What if she tripped? What if she got confused? What if she panicked? The mother wanted to jump up and help, to guide her daughter to safety, to protect her from the possibility of failure in front of all these people. But she stayed seated, because she knew that this moment, this walk, was something her daughter needed to do alone. Other parents watched with similar worry. Some pressed their hands to their chests. Others leaned forward as if their bodies could somehow help guide the girl across the stage. Everyone in that auditorium felt the weight of what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a walk across a stage. This was a test of courage. This was a young girl proving something to herself and to the world. Teachers exchanged glances from their seats near the front. Some had questioned whether this performance was a good idea. Was it fair to put so much pressure on a child who already faced so many challenges? What if something went wrong? What would that do to her confidence? But the music teacher, an older man who had been teaching at the school for 3 decades, had insisted. He had seen something in this girl that others hadn't noticed. He had heard it in the way she played, felt it in the determination she brought to every lesson. He knew she could do this. Still, even he felt his heart racing as he watched her make her way across the stage. The girl counted her steps silently in her head. She had memorized this journey. 15 steps from the curtain to the center of the stage, then a slight turn to the right. Then 8 more steps to where the piano waited. She had practiced this so many times that her feet knew the way even if her eyes couldn't see it. But practice and performance are 2 different things. In practice, the auditorium had been empty and quiet. Now it was filled with people, with energy, with expectations. The pressure was enormous. Her cane continued its rhythmic sweeping motion. Tap, step, tap, step. The sound echoed through the silent auditorium like a heartbeat. Some students in the audience felt their own eyes starting to well up with tears, though they couldn't quite explain why. There was something about watching this brave girl navigate her darkness in front of everyone that touched something deep inside them. It reminded them of their own fears, their own moments of doubt, their own times when they had to walk forward into uncertainty. A younger student, maybe 8 or 9 years old, tugged on her father's sleeve and whispered, "Is she scared?" The father looked at the girl on the stage, at the determined expression on her face, and whispered back, "Maybe, but she's doing it anyway." That was the truth of it. Fear and courage aren't opposites. They exist together. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward despite it. The girl's hand suddenly reached out to her left, fingers extended, searching for something. The audience held its breath. Had she gotten lost? Was she confused? But then her fingertips brushed against something smooth and solid, the edge of the piano. She had found it. A smile spread across her face. Not a big showy smile for the audience, a small private smile of victory. She had done it. She had walked across that stage alone and found her destination. She moved along the piano's edge until she reached the bench. Her hands felt for its position and she sat down carefully, adjusting herself until she was comfortable. She placed her cane on the floor beside her within easy reach. Then she positioned her hands above the keyboard, fingers curved ready. The audience waited. Some were still processing what they had just witnessed, that remarkable journey across the stage. Others were wondering what would come next. How could a girl who couldn't see the keys play a complicated piece of music? The girl took a deep breath. Her shoulders rose and fell. She was preparing herself, gathering her focus, entering the mental space where music lives. In that moment, sitting at the piano, she didn't look like a girl with a disability. She didn't look like someone who needed help or pity. She looked like exactly what she was, a musician about to share her art with the world. The auditorium remained silent. Hundreds of people sat completely still, waiting for the first notes to break the silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They all understood that they were witnessing something special, something rare, something that would stay with them for a very long time. The girl's fingers descended toward the keys, and the room held its collective breath, waiting for the music that would come next. 3 months earlier, on a cold Tuesday afternoon in January, the music teacher sat in his classroom long after the final bell had rung. The room was quiet except for the sound of rain tapping against the windows. He was grading papers, or at least trying to, but his mind kept wandering back to something that had happened during his last class. A new student had joined his beginner piano group that week. A 7th grade girl who had been blind since she was 7 years old. She had only been taking lessons for a few weeks, learning at home with a private instructor, and her parents thought it would be good for her to join a group class at school. The teacher had been doing this job for 30 years. He had seen thousands of students come through his classroom. Some had natural talent. Others worked hard to improve. Most fell somewhere in between. But every once in a while, maybe once or twice in a career, a teacher encounters something different, something special. He had felt it the moment this girl started playing. It wasn't that she was technically perfect. Far from it. She made mistakes like any beginner. Her timing wasn't always right. Her fingers sometimes fumbled on the keys, but there was something else there. Something underneath the surface that caught his attention and wouldn't let go. She played with emotion. Real, raw emotion that most students took years to develop, if they ever developed it at all. When she played a sad piece, you could hear the sadness. When she played something cheerful, you could feel the joy. It was as if she poured everything she felt into the music, holding nothing back. The teacher had watched her during that first class, completely absorbed in her playing, unaware that everyone else had stopped to listen. And he had made a decision right then, a decision that would change everything. He was going to ask her to perform at the spring concert. The next day, he stayed after school and waited for her in his classroom. She arrived for her private lesson right on time, her mother guiding her through the door. The teacher asked if he could speak with them both for a moment. He explained his idea carefully. The school's annual spring concert was in 3 months. It was a big event, attended by hundreds of people. He thought she should perform a solo piece. The mother's face went pale. "She's only been playing for a few weeks," she said, her voice tight with worry. "Don't you think that's too soon? Too much pressure?" The girl sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, listening to every word. The teacher leaned forward. "I know it seems like a lot," he said, "but I've been teaching for a long time and I can tell you that your daughter has something rare. She has the ability to make people feel something when she plays. That's not something you can teach. That's a gift." The mother shook her head. "But the stage, how would she even get to the piano? She's never performed in front of people before. What if she gets scared? What if she falls? Then we'll practice," the teacher said simply. "We'll practice the walk just as much as we practice the music. We'll do it over and over until she knows every step by heart." He turned to the girl. "What do you think? Do you want to try?" For a long moment she said nothing. Then slowly she nodded. "Yes," she said quietly. "I want to do it." The mother looked like she might argue, but something in her daughter's voice stopped her. She had heard that tone before. It was the same determination her daughter had shown when she insisted on going to regular school instead of a special school for the blind. The same stubbornness she displayed when she refused to let her disability define what she could and couldn't do. The mother sighed and squeezed her daughter's hand. "Okay," she said. "If this is what you want, we'll make it work." And so the training began. Every Tuesday and Thursday after school, the girl came to the music room for extra practice. But they didn't start with the music. They started with the walk. The teacher had measured the exact distance from the side curtain to the piano on the auditorium stage. He recreated that same distance in his classroom, marking the starting point with a piece of tape on the floor. 15 steps to the center, he told her, then turn right. 8 more steps to the piano. She practiced it again and again. At first she was slow and uncertain, her cane sweeping wide arcs as she felt her way forward. Sometimes she veered off course and had to start over. Sometimes she counted wrong and ended up in the wrong place, but she never complained. She never said it was too hard. She just went back to the starting point and tried again. Other teachers would sometimes peek into the classroom and watch. They didn't say anything to the music teacher directly, but he could see the doubt in their eyes. He heard them talking in the staff room during lunch. "Is this really a good idea?" one teacher asked. "What if she embarrasses herself in front of the whole school?" "It seems cruel to put that kind of pressure on a child," another said. "Especially one who's already dealing with so much." The music teacher said nothing. He knew they meant well. They were trying to protect the girl from possible failure and humiliation, but what they didn't understand was that protection can sometimes become a prison. This girl didn't want to be sheltered. She wanted to be challenged. She wanted to prove what she could do. As the weeks went by, something remarkable happened. The girl's steps became more confident. She stopped hesitating. She learned to trust her counting, to trust her spatial memory, to trust herself. And her piano playing improved just as dramatically. The teacher had chosen a challenging piece for her. Some of his colleagues thought he was crazy for picking something so difficult, but he knew what he was doing. The piece required both technical skill and emotional depth. It had fast sections and slow sections, loud parts and soft parts. It told a story through music. He taught her the piece in small sections, a few measures at a time. Since she couldn't read sheet music, she had to memorize everything by ear. He would play a phrase and she would repeat it back to him, over and over until she had the entire piece stored in her memory. There were frustrating days. Days when her fingers wouldn't cooperate, when the notes came out wrong, when nothing seemed to work right. On one particularly difficult Thursday, she played the same section 15 times and made mistakes every single time. Finally, she stopped playing and put her hands in her lap. The teacher thought she might cry. "I can't do this," she said quietly. "It's too hard." Maybe everyone was right. Maybe this was a bad idea. The teacher sat down on the piano bench beside her. He didn't say anything right away. He just sat there in the silence, thinking about how to respond. "You know what I think?" he finally said. "I think you're scared. And that's okay. It's normal to be scared when you're trying to do something you've never done before. But here's the thing about being scared. It means you're challenging yourself. It means you're growing." He paused, then continued. "I've taught piano for 30 years. I've had students who could play perfectly, but who never moved anyone with their music. They played all the right notes, but there was nothing behind it. No heart, no soul. But you? When you play, people feel something. That matters more than perfection." The girl was quiet for a moment. Then she placed her hands back on the keys. "Can we try it again?" she asked. They practiced for another hour that day. As the concert date grew closer, the teacher added a new element to their practice. He invited other students to sit in the classroom during her rehearsals. At first just 2 or 3, then more, then a small crowd. He wanted her to get used to playing in front of people, to feel their presence, to learn how to focus despite knowing she was being watched. The first time she played for an audience, even a small one, her hands shook slightly, but by the 5th or 6th rehearsal, she played as if she were alone in the room. She had learned to block everything out except the music. The night before the concert, the teacher stayed late in the auditorium. He walked the path from the curtain to the piano one more time, making sure there were no obstacles, nothing that could trip her up or throw off her counting. He thought about all the people who had questioned his decision, all the worry and doubt that had surrounded this performance from the beginning. And he thought about the girl, about her courage and determination, about the hours she had spent practicing not just the music, but the simple act of walking across a stage. Tomorrow, hundreds of people would watch her. Tomorrow she would have her chance to show everyone what she was capable of. Tomorrow everything would change. The girl sat at the piano bench, her hands hovering above the keys. The auditorium was so quiet that she could hear her own breathing. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, even though she couldn't see them. The air felt thick with expectation. For just a moment, doubt crept into her mind. What if she forgot the notes? What if her fingers froze? What if all those hours of practice disappeared the second she started playing? But then she remembered something her teacher had told her during one of their last practice sessions. He had said, "When you get on that stage, don't think about the audience. Don't think about what could go wrong. Just think about the music. Let everything else fade away." She took a deep breath, then another. She closed her eyes, even though it made no difference to what she could see. And then her fingers descended onto the keys. The first note rang out clear and pure. It hung in the air for a moment, a single perfect sound that seemed to reach every corner of the auditorium. Then came the second note, and the third. Her fingers began to move across the keyboard, and the music started to flow. The piece she had chosen was a classical composition, something that even advanced students found challenging. It started slowly, softly, with a melody that sounded almost like a question being asked. Her left hand played a gentle rhythm while her right hand carried the main theme. People in the audience shifted forward in their seats. They had come prepared to be polite, to applaud respectfully no matter how the performance went. But within the first 30 seconds, something changed. They weren't just listening out of courtesy anymore. They were actually listening. The girl's hands moved with a confidence that seemed impossible for someone who couldn't see what she was doing. There were no hesitations, no fumbling for keys. Her fingers knew exactly where to go, as if they had a memory of their own. But it wasn't just technical skill that captivated the audience. It was the emotion behind every note. When the music swelled louder, you could feel the intensity of it. When it dropped to a whisper, you found yourself holding your breath, afraid to make a sound that might disturb the delicate beauty of what she was creating. She played with her whole body, swaying slightly, her face reflecting the journey the music was taking her on. Her mother sat in the third row with tears already streaming down her face. She wasn't crying because she felt sorry for her daughter. She was crying because she was witnessing something she had never quite believed was possible. She was watching her little girl, the same child who had cried so many nights after losing her sight, the same child who had struggled to navigate a world designed for people who could see, playing music that made everyone in the room forget about disabilities and limitations. In that moment, her daughter wasn't a blind girl. She was simply a musician, pure and simple. The music teacher stood near the side of the stage, his arms crossed, a slight smile on his face. He had known she could do this. He had heard that special something in her playing from the very beginning. But even he was surprised by how completely she commanded the stage. All those people who had doubted, who had questioned his judgment, who had thought he was putting too much pressure on a vulnerable child, they were seeing now what he had seen all along. Scattered throughout the audience were her classmates. Some had been friendly to her. Others had mostly ignored her, not quite knowing how to interact with someone who was different. A few had even been unkind, making jokes about her cane or her thick glasses that couldn't help her see. But now they all sat in stunned silence, watching her fingers dance across the keys. Some felt ashamed of how they had treated her. Others felt inspired. A boy who sat near the back, someone who had always thought of himself as untalented and ordinary, felt something shift inside him as he listened. If she could do this, maybe he could pursue the things he was afraid to try. The music shifted into a faster section. Her fingers moved rapidly across the keys, playing a cascade of notes that tumbled over each other like water rushing down a stream. This was the hardest part of the piece, the part she had struggled with the most during practice. The part where just 2 weeks ago she had wanted to give up, but her fingers didn't stumble. They flew across the keyboard with precision and grace. She had practiced this section hundreds of times, playing it over and over until her hands could execute it without conscious thought. And now, when it mattered most, all that practice paid off. The fast section lasted about 30 seconds, though it felt both longer and shorter than that to everyone listening. When it ended and the music slowed again, several people in the audience realized they had been holding their breath. A grandmother who had brought her grandson to the concert reached for her purse to find a tissue. She had come expecting a nice evening of student performances. She hadn't expected to be moved to tears by a 12-year-old she had never met before. The music continued to build and flow, following the emotional arc the composer had written more than 100 years ago. But somehow, through this girl's interpretation, it felt fresh and new. It felt personal. It felt like she was telling her own story through someone else's notes. And in a way, she was. Every challenge she had faced since losing her sight was in that music. Every moment of frustration when she couldn't do things the way other people did them. Every small victory when she learned to navigate the world in her own way. Every person who had doubted her. Every person who had believed in her. All of it poured through her fingers and into the keys. The piece moved into its final section. The melody that had started as a question at the beginning now came back. But this time it sounded different. It sounded like an answer. Like a resolution. Like someone who had been searching for something and finally found it. Her playing grew softer now, more delicate. Each note was placed carefully, tenderly, as if she were handling something precious. The audience leaned in, not wanting to miss a single sound. A janitor who had been cleaning the hallway outside the auditorium stopped his work and cracked open the door to listen. He had heard hundreds of student concerts over his 15 years working at the school. Most of them were fine, some were good, a few were forgettable. But this was something else entirely. The final notes approached. The girl's hands moved slowly now, playing the last phrase of the piece with such gentleness that it almost seemed to float in the air. The melody climbed upward, reaching for something, and then finally came to rest on a single sustained note. She held that note, letting it ring out and gradually fade into silence. Her foot stayed on the pedal, allowing the sound to linger as long as possible, and then finally she lifted her hands from the keys and placed them gently in her lap. It was over. For a moment, nothing happened. The auditorium remained completely silent. The girl sat at the piano, unsure what to do next. Had she done well? Had she made mistakes she didn't notice? The silence stretched on, and she started to worry. But this wasn't the silence of disappointment. This was the silence of people who had just experienced something so beautiful, so moving, that they needed a moment to process what they had witnessed. It was the silence of hearts touched and minds changed. Then from somewhere in the third row, her mother stood up. She started clapping, her hands coming together in loud, deliberate strikes. The sound broke the spell that had held the audience frozen. One by one, other people rose to their feet. The student sitting next to the mother's seat stood up. Then the person next to them. Like a wave spreading across the auditorium, people began to rise and applaud. Within seconds, the entire audience was standing. The applause started as individual claps, but quickly merged into a sustained roar of appreciation. People weren't just clapping politely. They were cheering. Some were whistling. Others were shouting words of encouragement and praise. The girl sat at the piano, overwhelmed by the sound washing over her. She hadn't expected this. She had hoped to simply get through the performance without making major mistakes. She had hoped not to embarrass herself or disappoint her teacher. But this response was something else entirely. This was something she had never imagined. The applause continued, growing louder instead of fading away. People clapped until their hands hurt. The standing ovation went on for nearly 2 full minutes, an eternity in the world of school concerts. The music teacher walked onto the stage, still clapping, and gently touched the girl's shoulder. She stood up, a bit unsteady, and he guided her to the center of the stage. "Take a bow," he whispered. She bent forward in a small bow, and the applause somehow grew even louder. But what happened next was something nobody expected. Something that wasn't part of the program. Something that would make this night unforgettable for everyone who was there. The girl stood at the center of the stage, overwhelmed by the thunderous applause that surrounded her. She could feel the vibrations of hundreds of people clapping, the sound bouncing off the walls and ceiling of the auditorium. Her teacher stood beside her, his hand still resting gently on her shoulder. She bowed once more, and the applause began to gradually fade. People started to sit back down. The girl turned to walk off the stage, assuming her part in the concert was finished. Other students still needed to perform, and the program had to continue. But then something unexpected happened. A voice called out from the audience. "Wait!" Everyone turned to see who had spoken. It was a boy from the 10th grade, a tall student who played on the school basketball team. He stood up from his seat near the middle of the auditorium. He started, his voice a bit shaky. "I just want to say something." The principal, who was standing near the side of the stage, looked confused. This wasn't part of the program, but she nodded for him to continue. The boy cleared his throat. "I've been at this school for 3 years, and I've seen a lot of performances, but I've never seen anything like what we just watched. That was incredible, and I think she should know that." He started walking toward the stage. The girl stood there, confused, not understanding what was happening. Her teacher leaned down and whispered, "Someone wants to tell you something." The boy climbed the steps onto the stage and walked over to where she stood. Up close, she could hear his breathing, nervous and quick. "Hi," he said quietly, just to her. "I don't know if you remember me. We had English class together last year. I never really talked to you much, and I'm sorry about that. But I wanted you to know that what you just did was amazing. Like, seriously amazing. You made me cry, and I never cry. Not at basketball games, not at movies, never. But your music, it got to me." The girl's face flushed. She didn't know what to say. "Thank you," she managed to whisper. The boy stepped back, but he didn't leave the stage. Instead, he turned to face the audience. "If anyone else wants to say something to her, you should come up. She deserves to hear it." For a moment, nobody moved. Then a girl from the 9th grade stood up. Then another student. Then a teacher. Within seconds, a line began to form near the stage steps. The principal looked at the music teacher, uncertain whether to stop this or let it continue. He shrugged and smiled. "Let them," he said simply. One by one, people came onto the stage. They weren't just students. There were teachers, parents, even some people who had no direct connection to the girl, but felt compelled to share how her performance had affected them. A freshman girl with bright red hair was next. She looked even more nervous than the basketball player had been. "I'm trying out for the school play next week," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been scared to do it because I thought I wasn't good enough. But watching you tonight, you showed me that being scared isn't a reason not to try. Thank you for that." An older teacher came up, a woman who had been teaching science at the school for over 20 years. She had a reputation for being strict and serious, someone who rarely showed emotion, but her eyes were red from crying. "I became a teacher because I wanted to make a difference," she said to the girl. "But somewhere along the way, I think I forgot why I started. I got tired, burnt out. Tonight, you reminded me what it's all about. You reminded me why education matters, why it's worth it." A father who had come to watch his own son perform approached with his young daughter, maybe 6 or 7 years old. The little girl held a small stuffed animal in her arms. "My daughter wanted to give you this," the father said. "She says you're brave, and brave people should have brave animals to keep them company." The girl accepted the stuffed animal, running her fingers over its soft fur. It was a lion. She hugged it to her chest, completely overwhelmed. The line continued. A student who had been in the girl's math class confessed that he used to feel uncomfortable around her, because he didn't know how to act around someone who was blind. "But you're just like everyone else," he said. "Actually, no. You're better than most of us. You work harder. You care more." "I'm sorry I didn't see that before." An elderly woman who had been a music teacher at a different school for 40 years before retiring came up. "I've heard thousands of students play over my career," she said, her voice trembling. I've heard professionals perform in concert halls around the world, but very rarely have I heard someone play with as much heart as you just did. You have a true gift, young lady. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. Each person who spoke revealed something personal. The girl's performance had opened something inside them, made them confront their own fears, their own regrets, their own dreams. She had shown them what was possible when you refuse to let obstacles define what you can achieve. A boy who had been in the girls' science class stood awkwardly in front of her, shuffling his feet. He was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "Last year I said something mean about your cane," he finally admitted. "I made a joke about it in the cafeteria. I don't think you heard me, but some other people did, and they laughed. I felt bad about it ever since. I'm really sorry. What you did tonight was amazing, and you didn't deserve the way I treated you." The girl reached out her hand, and after a moment the boy took it. She squeezed it gently. "It's okay," she said. "Thank you for telling me." The music teacher watched this unfold with quiet amazement. He had known the girl's performance would be special, but he hadn't anticipated this. He hadn't imagined that a simple piano recital would turn into a moment of collective honesty and vulnerability for so many people. A mother came up with tears streaming down her face. "My son has autism," she said. "People don't always understand him. They get impatient when he needs extra time to process things or when he does things differently than other kids. Watching you tonight, seeing how you navigate the world your own way and create something so beautiful, it gives me hope for my son. It reminds me that different doesn't mean less." The girl's own mother watched from her seat, her hand pressed to her mouth. She had worried so much about this performance. She had lost sleep imagining all the things that could go wrong. But she had never imagined this. She had never imagined that her daughter's courage would touch so many lives in such a profound way. The line of people eventually began to thin. The concert had gone completely off schedule. The principal kept glancing at her watch, but she didn't stop what was happening. Some moments are more important than schedules. Finally, the last person in line approached. It was a girl from the 8th grade who used a wheelchair to get around. She rolled up to where the blind girl stood and stopped. "I know we don't really know each other," she said, "but I wanted to thank you for tonight. People see my wheelchair before they see me. They make assumptions about what I can and can't do. I get tired of having to prove myself all the time. But you just went up there and showed everyone what you're capable of. You didn't make excuses. You didn't ask for special treatment. You just did it. That means a lot to me. It means more than you probably know." The blind girl bent down and hugged her. The two girls stayed like that for a moment. Two young people who understood what it meant to navigate a world that wasn't always designed for them. When they separated, the girl in the wheelchair rolled back off the stage. The line was empty now. The spontaneous testimonials were over. The music teacher came to the girl's side. "Are you ready to go?" he asked gently. She nodded, exhausted from the emotion of the evening. He picked up her cane from where it rested beside the piano and handed it to her. She took his arm, and together they walked off the stage. The audience applauded again, but it was different this time. Softer, more reverent. They had just witnessed something none of them would ever forget. As the girl disappeared behind the curtain, people began to gather their things. The concert would continue with the remaining performers, but everyone knew that nothing else that night would compare to what they had just experienced. Parents pulled out their phones and began texting friends and family about what they had seen. Students whispered excitedly to each other, already knowing this would become a story they told for years to come. And somewhere in that audience, a man had recorded the entire performance on his phone. He looked down at the video, watching it play back on his small screen, and made a decision that would change everything. He was going to share this with the world. The man who had recorded the performance sat in his car in the school parking lot, his phone still in his hand. The concert had ended 20 minutes ago, but he hadn't started driving yet. He kept watching the video over and over, each time feeling the same emotions wash over him. He wasn't the girl's father. His own daughter had performed earlier in the evening, playing a simple violin piece. She had done fine, and he was proud of her. But this girl's performance was something else entirely. He thought about keeping the video to himself, maybe sharing it with a few friends. But something told him this needed to be seen by more people. The world was full of negativity and division. People needed to see something beautiful, something that reminded them of the good that humans are capable of. When he got home that night, he uploaded the video to social media. He wrote a simple caption explaining what he had witnessed: a blind seventh grader walking alone to a piano and performing a piece that moved an entire auditorium to tears. He described the unexpected moment when students and teachers had lined up to thank her personally. Then he pressed share and went to bed. The next morning, he woke up to discover the video had been viewed 10,000 times. People he didn't know were commenting, sharing their own reactions, tagging their friends. By the time he got to work, it had reached 50,000 views. The girl had no idea any of this was happening. She went to school on Friday like any other day. Her mother dropped her off at the front entrance, and she made her way to her locker using the route she had memorized. Some students congratulated her as she passed in the hallway, but that seemed normal after a successful performance. By lunchtime, the video had reached 500,000 views. By the end of the school day, it had crossed 2 million. The girl's mother got a phone call from a local news station that afternoon. They wanted to do a story about her daughter. Then another station called, then a newspaper. The mother sat at her kitchen table, completely overwhelmed, trying to understand what was happening. Over the weekend, the video exploded. It appeared on national news programs. Popular social media accounts with millions of followers shared it. Celebrities commented on it. The view counter kept climbing. 5 million, 10 million, 15 million. Messages began pouring in from all over the world. Parents of blind children wrote to say that the video had given them hope for their own kids' futures. Adults who were blind shared their own stories of overcoming obstacles. Teachers wrote about how they were going to show the video to their students as an example of determination and courage. But the messages that meant the most to the girl were the ones from other young people who were facing their own challenges. Kids with disabilities who had felt limited by what others told them they couldn't do. Students who were afraid to try something new because they might fail. Anyone who had ever felt different or left out. A boy from Australia wrote that he had a learning disability and had been too embarrassed to read aloud in class. After watching the video, he volunteered to read the next day. A girl from Brazil who had lost her leg in an accident said the video inspired her to try out for her school's soccer team. A teenager from Japan who stuttered wrote that seeing the blind girl perform gave him the courage to join the debate club. The video reached people in ways the girl never could have imagined. It spread across continents and languages. People added subtitles in different languages. It was shown in schools and community centers. Parents showed it to their children at bedtime, using it as a lesson about perseverance and believing in yourself. 2 weeks after the concert, an envelope arrived at the school addressed to the girl. Inside was a letter from a prestigious music academy in New York. They had seen the video. They wanted to offer her a full scholarship to attend their summer program. All expenses paid. She would study with some of the best piano instructors in the country. More offers followed. Other music schools reached out. Symphony orchestras invited her to perform. A famous pianist who had won international competitions sent a personal letter praising her talent and offering to mentor her. The girl's mother sat with her daughter one evening, reading through the letters and emails that continued to arrive. "How do you feel about all of this?" she asked. The girl was quiet for a moment. "It's overwhelming," she admitted. "I just wanted to play piano at a school concert. I didn't expect any of this. Do you regret it?" her mother asked. "Would you go back and not do the performance if you could?" "No," the girl said immediately. "Never. That performance was the scariest and best thing I've ever done." Her mother hugged her tightly. "I'm sorry I doubted you at the beginning. I was trying to protect you, but I realize now that I was also limiting you. You proved me wrong in the best possible way." Back at school, things had changed for the girl. Students who had barely noticed her before now smiled and said hello in the hallways. Teachers treated her with a new kind of respect, but she remained the same person she had always been, humble and focused on her studies and her music. The music teacher watched his student navigate her newfound attention with quiet pride. He had known she was special from the beginning, but even he was surprised by the global response to her performance. In his 30 years of teaching, he had never seen anything like it. One afternoon, several months after the concert, a package arrived for him at the school. Inside was a framed photo of him and the girl standing together on stage the night of the performance. Attached was a handwritten note from her. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't fully believe in myself," it read. Thank you for pushing me to try something scary. Thank you for teaching me that the only real limitations are the ones we accept. You changed my life." He put the photo on his desk where he could see it every day. The girl's story continued to spread. A year later, the video had been viewed over 50 million times. It became one of those pieces of content that resurfaces every few months, shared by new people discovering it for the first time. Each time it circulated again, a new wave of messages would arrive. The girl performed at several prestigious venues over the following years. She played at concert halls where famous musicians had performed. She was interviewed on television programs and podcasts. She became an advocate for accessibility in music education, speaking at conferences about how schools could better support students with disabilities. But she never forgot where it all started. Every year on the anniversary of that school concert, she returned to her old middle school auditorium. She would stand at the side of the stage right where she had stood that night, and remember the fear she felt before walking out alone. Then she would walk the path again, from the curtain to the piano, counting her steps like she had practiced so many times. 15 steps to the center, turn right, 8 more steps to the piano, and she would sit down and play, not for cameras or audiences of thousands, but for the memory of that 12-year-old girl who decided to do something that terrified her. The video's impact extended far beyond the girl herself. Teachers around the world used it in their classrooms to teach lessons about courage and perseverance. Parents shared it with their children when they faced difficult challenges. Counselors played it for clients who were struggling with feelings of inadequacy or fear. The girl in the wheelchair who had thanked her after the performance became her close friend. The basketball player who had started the line of people on stage went on to become a teacher himself, inspired by what he had witnessed that night. The shy freshman who had been afraid to try out for the school play became an actress and credited the blind girl's performance with giving her the courage to pursue her dreams. Years later, when asked about the moment that changed her life, the girl always gave the same answer. "I didn't set out to inspire millions of people. I just wanted to play piano, but I learned something important that night. When you do something brave, when you push past your fear and show the world what you're capable of, you give other people permission to do the same. Your courage becomes their courage. Your victory becomes their hope." She paused, then continued. "I walked across that stage alone, but I wasn't really alone. I carried with me everyone who had ever doubted themselves, everyone who had been told they couldn't do something because they were different. And when I played that piano, I played for all of them too." The video remains online, still being discovered by new viewers every day. In the comments section, people continue to share their stories of how it impacted them. Parents write about showing it to their children. Students write about how it helped them get through difficult times. People from all walks of life write about how a 4-minute video of a blind girl playing piano reminded them that limitations are often just illusions we create for ourselves. The girl went on to have a successful career as a musician and teacher. She recorded albums. She performed in concert halls around the world. She taught hundreds of students, many of them children with disabilities who had seen her video and dreamed of making music themselves. But whenever she's asked about her greatest accomplishment, she doesn't mention the concerts or the awards or the recognition. She talks about that night in a middle school auditorium when she walked alone to a piano and played with all her heart. Because that was the night she discovered that the only